its simplest level, I really believe it comes down to two things: a frank assessment of the current situation, and then a simple and highly focused action plan to build on your success from that baseline. So from the assessment side, I think it really comes down to three elements that are the most critical. One, do we really know our customer? What evidence of customer loyalty do we have? What evidence of changes in customer behavior do we have? Do we fully understand the pressures on them and their market and their business? Second, do we fully understand the new market dynamics? So how has the competitive situation changed? And if it has, is that a threat or an opportunity potentially? Will our traditional markets sustain us, or as Jane hinted, potentially overpower us given the changes? And finally, what level of risk and opportunity exists with those markets, and over what time horizon, which is a critical element to be looking at? And finally, do we really know ourselves? Do we understand what our reputation and perceived value is in the marketplace? Do we really understand our potential in this new world? And finally, have we taken the time to step back and look at our aspirations as things unfold? So within that, with that baseline established, then you can move on with the right information to look at the two primary customer considerations we'll be covering off today. How do I retain the customers I have? And then how do I grow beyond that? Is it through focus? Is it through new markets? Is it through new customers?
So after 8 months of COVID disruption, you and your staff have gone to great lengths to reopen and to continue your business operations. We realize it hasn't been easy, and I'm sure there have been a lot of surprises. And while it may take additional efforts, it's important to determine how your customer base has changed. Some of this you may be able to determine through observation, but we would urge you to also take some steps to quantify the level of change. Many of you collect postal codes, for example, but human nature is such that we don't always analyze them. We recently completed a study where we were given 3 years of untabulated postal codes. What we learned from unpacking that data set has now provided a baseline for the organization going forward. So now is a great time to spend a couple hours with your postal code data and see what patterns are emerging. Is your trade area the same as it was last year at this time? Has it grown in area or is it smaller? Most of this you can capture from your POS, your point of sale system, in a simple Excel spreadsheet. And there are online tools and mapping that will allow you to see if your capture area has increased. You may even find that some of your business has expanded outside of any expected geography, and some of your business has now become available to you virtually, and that's a very good thing. Email addresses are another way to look at whether or not you're serving the same or different customers. Your accounting system will allow you to see how much business is coming from which emails. And so by extending your analysis a little bit further, if you can match your data with your sales, it's possible to see if your customers are matched to the same products that they were pre-COVID. If the alignment has changed, there may be an emerging business opportunity. It's worth exploring what it will mean for the future of your business. The old adage that a customer experience defines your brand is now reality. I would say that it was sometimes hard to see this abstract truth at work before COVID, but it's definitely true now. Individuals that were hired to work back of house are now finding themselves talking to your customers, explaining new processes to them, and providing direction on how you conduct your business. That's not the skill set they were hired for, but here we are. And it's been new for everyone, and now that we're 8 months in, there are some new standards and expectations from customers. How your frontline service people handle your customers is now subject to new norms and raised expectations. Are your customers receiving clear information about how to access your products and services? Whether you're in retail, food service, or providing professional counseling, customers are now expecting to be served at this new level and will be quick to call out service that is not at expectations. You've worked with people to put new processes in place. Our previous webinar on people was focused on best practices to support and retrain your colleagues for the new realities of your business. You've held team meetings to hear feedback and change up the processes, certain that everything goes smoothly going forward. And now that people are more comfortable, do they have the flexibility to respond to new requests or even break the routine because it may make sense to that customer in that exchange? And whether your staff can adapt and be flexible when individual cases call for an exception will also become part of your brand experience. All this means that while we have new routines, it's wise to continue to provide support to your staff and hear their feedback on how their experience continues to require change and how they can improve the customer experience. If your product offerings have changed, updating your main digital channels, whether that is your Facebook page or your website or both, is the most cost-effective way to let potential customers know something is different in your business. Adding the capability to chat with customers online so that you can begin a dialogue about what is available. And if you have been delaying adding e-commerce to sell online, now is the time to take that step. Like all of us streaming too many programs and movies, we now recognize productions that were pre-COVID, and we actually cringe when people are not physically distancing or exhibiting inappropriate behavior. And while we can forgive our entertainment channels, marketing materials will not get as easy a pass. I've noticed one national chain has added a caveat to their video ad to tell people that the scenes were recorded pre-COVID. Another has added a note to say that precautions were taken during the production to keep everyone safe. It's worth taking a clear, objective look at your existing materials, and if they reflect old realities, then it's time to consider how to update them to ensure they are timely and relevant and not cringeworthy. The other lens that you will want to use is see if your brochure and your video content reflects your current value proposition. Are the featured services still available? Do they remain your core business? The good news here is that using your digital platforms, it may not be overly expensive to build in an effective fix. Take the time to ensure you're putting out the message that you want to convey.
So let's start our discussion of the business-to-business world with some specific suggestions for the understand or assessment activities. So there's a lot of similarities with the B2C world, but I think the added complexity of the multiple possible paths to market, complexity of many of the solutions offered, and the multiple participants in the sales process require a much more multifaceted analysis of the customer and the market. So I'd recommend starting with a 360-degree view, looking at every aspect that could impact your business. But ultimately, I think it comes down to two really critical elements: the end customer situation and the multi-level supply chain impact. So the end customer dynamic paints the strongest picture of future demand and the timing of any impact on that demand, where it's critical to take that analysis right to the end of the value chain if you're in the middle of that chain. So next assessment area I would look at closely is customer behavior, particularly when you're selling a complex solution. And one of the things I would recommend you look for is whether there's indications that those customers are moving to what I call the DIY or do-it-yourself model, where rather than buying your full solutions, they're buying your core products only. This has become quite prevalent in the industry for companies that supply OEMs or original equipment manufacturers. So pay particular attention to purchase frequency, product mix, and other general trends in the as indicators. Then finally, part of that assessment, make sure you have full operational visibility, including CRM for pipeline and a real-time view of your backlog and backlog trends for those of you in the manufacturing space. It's never been more critical to have simple, shared, timely, and visible metrics to enable informed decisions on a day-to-day basis. So starting with retention, Joel referenced his old adage about the brand. I'd go a bit further and say there's two things I'd like to remember here. That generally products are purchased based on brand, and that's perception and reputation. Services and solutions, as we move into more complex offerings, are generally purchased based on trust, where traditionally that trust has been between a salesperson and the customer. So a lot of the trust came from the reputation. Brand has still had to be solid, but the trust came from that relationship. And second, and going to the second bullet here about the subject matter expert, the business development managers themselves need to put more focus on channel development and brand development and support than just on their sales efforts. So they can do that in a couple of ways. One is by positioning themselves as subject matter experts, where they take their reputation and experience in the industry to build the reputation for themselves and the company through association, or as a brand ambassador, just making sure that everybody's fully aware of what the offerings can do. So marketing is going to play an absolutely critical role in this change, where they move from traditional promotional marketing into the sales enablement realm, with a particular focus on ensuring that the content that is delivered to the market and to the sales team highly focused, timely, and relevant for exactly what's going on, and really reinforces the value proposition. Back to Joel's point. So sales needs to fully embrace marketing in this new world as their partners in developing this enhanced content and ensuring its effective delivery to the customers. That's how we retain that trust capability, or trust. So as a final point on retention, process and structure have never been more important. Everybody needs to know the role they're playing and the expectations with that role across that full customer engagement model and the customer life cycle. So key in my mind in the current environment is to look at things a little bit differently. And before you invest in new markets and solutions, take a really hard look at the success and the returns with your current offerings, and take that as your first step. So as you look at positioning the brand and the subject matter experts, I think it comes down to three fundamental focus areas: really strong success stories that are as specific as possible, a clear and proven value proposition, which is backed by those success stories, and finally, the market recognition of those industry experts by just persistent pursuit of positioning those people. So if I toggle over to the more traditional growth options, they're still completely valid and shouldn't be pushed aside. But I would say that there are two early indicators that you may have something. One is a struggling competitor. They always represent a great opportunity to take market share, where ultimately an acquisition may be worth consideration or worthy of consideration, particularly if the brand reputation of that company is strong, or they have subject matter experts whose expertise and reputation may be transferable to your organization. Other than that, all the fundamentals of an acquisition would play. Second one I would highly recommend looking at would be the government programs. So I know you will have already looked at the programs that apply to your specific and current business model, but I'm suggesting going one step further. Look at the full breadth of the programs that are out there to see if any of them fall into parallel or adjacent markets to your current market. If they do, analysis of the potential partnerships is completely in order, where ultimately these partnerships could ultimately lead to a merger and acquisition themselves.